Scott, how are you?
Good.
So the book is The Messy Middle.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for writing it.
Okay.
Because I think so many people miss that part of the journey, right? You talk a lot about the romanticism of the beginning and the end. We're in the fight capital of the world. And
Right.
even in this place, people forget about the camps that the fighters go to. They think
Yes.
about the guy became a fighter and the guy knocked somebody out. But there's this stuff that goes on in the middle. For people, can you level set the importance of understanding what that journey is like?
Yeah, it's the middle of every project is extraordinarily volatile, and it's a successive series of ups and downs, right? And it's moments of hopelessness and working amidst complete ambiguity and anxiety and uncertainty and anonymity. And then there's occasional moments where it's like, wow, everything seems to be working,
Sure.
or what just happened? Like people actually like our product now, and so what's really important to recognize though is that we are not our best self at either the lows or the highs. At those lows, we make decisions out of fear. We're
Sure.
worried. We start to question ourselves and churn our strategy. And at those highs, we start to falsely attribute the things that we did to the things that work. And we stop to lose the pulse of the
Right.
market and how our team is really performing and what's really happening with our customers. And so it's the messy middle is really a series of insights for managing that volatility and making sure that you're enduring those lows and you're optimizing the heck out of anything that actually works.
Now, in the beginning of the book, you talk about 7 years of notes and scribbles and
Yeah.
scrawls. Like, what was the moment that it kind of congealed for you and you went, this is the next book I'm going to write? Because it was a departure from the first book, for sure.
Right.
When did you go, yep, I've got 300 pages here, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because it was like a number of years of just building this content, and I think when I challenged myself to organize it into camps and realized that there were these three categories of content: the endurance, optimization, and that final mile, like how to make sure we ship and succeed, succeed at
Right.
the end. I realized, wow, like there's a bit of a framework there. There's something that resonates in terms of how this story should be told. And so I challenged myself to start asking friends and others and see if there was something there.
In 2017, I believe, Tim Ferriss's second book came out, and you show up in it. And he did a series of podcasts where he kind of asked you to audioize
Yep.
the answers, right?
Yeah.
But what I thought was fascinating is I think many people look at someone like you or someone like Tim Ferriss or someone like Seth Godin and they think, well, they wouldn't have mentors. But in the beginning of that podcast, Tim says you are his mentor, right? And as entrepreneurs are listening to this, or people who are going to start or creatives, can you talk a little bit about the importance of having mentors as you're going through every phase of creating something?
Yeah, well, firstly, you mentioned Tim and Seth, who are both mentors of mine, so I'm flattered he said that. But I think it's important to have people who ask you the right questions, right? And where do the right questions come from? They come from experience.
Sure.
They come from a different vantage point altogether. They come from people who feel confident, in themselves, and also brave enough to ask you the question that maybe others won't.
Yep.
And those are two people in my life that do that with me. And I seek those folks because, frankly, the more senior you become in a company or in an industry or in a market, the less often people
Yes.
ask you those difficult questions.
Absolutely.
And sometimes there isn't a logical or clear answer to them, but they just make you think. And so I try to get that from people, and I also try to challenge myself to do that for people that I work with, because that's the greatest thing you can do for someone's career, right? Is
Absolutely.
to ask those difficult questions. So I think that's why I try to find people in my life and have almost like an annual pilgrimage where I go and seek those difficult questions from them.
Absolutely. So we're obviously at the Adobe Summit, and the theme about this is this customer experience,
Yep.
this customer personalization. And in the messy middle, you talk about you have to lean into this friction. You have to
Yes.
be one with the friction because that's how you're going to get to the end. Contrasted with you want a customer to have a seamless, almost ubiquitous experience. Can
Right.
you talk about that push and pull?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And first of all, I actually think that you need some friction in the customer experience, which I'll explain in a
Sure.
minute. But ultimately, we talked about today, people are not buying a product, they're buying an experience. An experience is an end-to-end experience, and it happens across surfaces, in store, in email, on mobile, everywhere else, right? And right now, we're at that stage in technology where every company knows that, but companies don't really know how to achieve it.
Yes.
And it's not just a tools problem, it's also a culture issue. And I think one of the challenges we have is we can bring the tools to our customers, but we also have to make sure that they're organized in such a way where they can achieve this end-to-end experience for the customer, where they can have design at the center.
Right.
And also designers who can make sure and monitor across surface to make sure there's consistency. So there's a lot to it, both from an organizational as well as a technical solution perspective.
Yep.
Friction, though, also sometimes some degree of friction helps a customer feel invested in the product or in the experience that they're going through. When you are building a digital product and you start to take away more and more friction, what you end up realizing that more and more people get into the product who shouldn't be there. And so in some ways, friction is a gate for a customer to determine whether or not they're going to invest versus carelessly engage with your product or experience.
Right.
And so there is like a counterintuitive idea of let's not remove too many boundaries. Let's make sure that the customer earns their way into this experience and commits, because it's a partnership. Like, you're only going to succeed if you actually care about it. And that's part of the puzzle as well.
Last question I'm going to ask you. We're in the beginning parts of 2019. If you could give someone who's starting an endeavor this year one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say is to embrace the role of the designer more than you think. Don't outsource design so quickly. Recognize that a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. You can solve so much in an organization by showing rather than telling. Usually as a company or as any team, when you have a problem, you throw a process at it.
Sure.
And when people are misaligned, you just create a process, and that slows people down. The alternative to process is alignment. And the forcing function for alignment oftentimes, in my experience, is design, is showing rather than telling. So empowering designers to come to the meeting, to present their work, to show what the solution might look like as a way to get people wrapped around, like, oh, what are we supposed to do as a company, is a cheat code for strategy and success, in my opinion.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Enjoy the summit.
Thank you.